Every morning, thousands of workers once entered this factory, believing they had secure jobs, rare skills, and a future they could pass on to their children. They were right, until they weren't. Inside these buildings, automobiles were crafted by hand to standards few companies ever attempted. The cars were exceptional, the workers were highly skilled, the reputation was global. None of that was enough. When the company collapsed, the machines were sold, the doors were locked, and the knowledge walked out for the last time, carried by people who would never practice their craft again. This is the story of how one of America's finest manufacturers disappeared and what Buffalo lost when it did. At the beginning of the 20th century, Buffalo was one of the most important industrial cities in the United States. Located at the eastern end of the Great Lakes, it functioned as a hinge between the agricultural Midwest and the industrial East Coast. Grain arrived by ship and departed by rail. Steel flowed through the city. Power from Niagara Falls fed factories that ran day and night. Buffalo was not a boomtown built on speculation. It was a production city. Its economy depended on making things, moving things, and employing skilled labor at scale. Factories here were not temporary structures. They were civic monuments. Their size and permanence reflected confidence that industry would continue indefinitely. For workers, this created stability. Skills were learned slowly and deliberately. Apprentices became craftsmen. Craftsmen became foremen. Families expected employment to last generations. Manufacturing was not simply a job, it was identity. Into this environment came George Norman Pierce. Pierce began his business career in 1865 producing bird cages. It was meticulous work, requiring precision and consistency. From bird cages, he moved into bicycles, then motorcycles, and eventually automobiles. Each step followed the same logic: build fewer products, build them better, and charge accordingly. By 1901, the George N. Pierce Company produced its first automobile, a modest machine known as the motorette. It was functional, unremarkable, and quickly revealed a problem. Pierce could not compete with emerging mass manufacturers on price or volume. Companies like Ford were already moving towards standardized production and interchangeable parts. Pierce recognized that competing in that space would require abandoning the careful craftsmanship that defined his company. Instead, he chose a different path. Pierce concluded that there was room in the American market for automobiles that were not designed to be affordable, but to be exceptional. Cars that were expensive not because of branding, but because of the labor and engineering required to build them. In 1904, the company introduced the Great Arrow. It was a four-cylinder luxury automobile priced at $4,000. At a time when many Americans earned less than $500 a year, this price was extraordinary. The Great Arrow was not intended for the middle class. It was aimed at industrialists, financiers, politicians, and institutions that valued reliability and prestige above cost. In 1905, the company entered the Great Arrow in the Glidden Tour, an 1,100-mile endurance race designed to test reliability on primitive roads. Percy Pierce won outright. The victory mattered because automobiles were still regarded as fragile machines. Reliability was not assumed. Pierce Arrow established itself not merely as a luxury brand, but as a manufacturer of durable, over-engineered machines. From that point forward, the company committed fully to prestige. In 1906, Pierce Arrow purchased 44 acres on Elmwood Avenue, land previously occupied by the Pan American Exposition. The company commissioned Albert Kahn to design a factory worthy of its ambitions. Kahn was already redefining industrial architecture in America. He believed factories should be efficient, rational, and permanent. His designs emphasized natural light, airflow, and logical material movement, but they also communicated confidence. The Elmwood Avenue complex was among the most sophisticated industrial facilities in the country. Sawtooth roofs flooded workspaces with daylight, reducing reliance on artificial lighting and improving working conditions. Internal rail systems allowed raw materials to move seamlessly through the factory. The administration building stretched across the front of the site, presenting a unified and authoritative facade. Every design decision assumed continuity. This was not a factory built to survive a business cycle. It was built to last generations. Production began in 1907. In 1908, the company was renamed the Pierce Arrow Motor Car Company. George Pierce sold his remaining interest shortly afterward and died in 1910, never seeing how large the company would become. Pierce Arrow's identity soon became inseparable from engineering excess. While competitors relied on four-cylinder engines, Pierce Arrow committed entirely to six-cylinder designs. These engines were not merely large, they were enormous. Displacement exceeded 11 liters and eventually reached 13.5. In 1918, Pierce Arrow introduced one of the most complex flathead engines ever manufactured, 4 valves per cylinder and 3 spark plugs per cylinder. This configuration was expensive, difficult to maintain, and unnecessary by most standards. But Pierce Arrow customers did not buy necessity, they bought assurance. The company engineered automobiles not to meet requirements, but to exceed them by margins that seemed irrational. In 1914, designer Herbert Dawley introduced the feature that would define Pierce Arrow visually for the next quarter century. Headlights mounted directly into the front fenders. The design gave the cars a wider, more imposing stance and made them instantly recognizable at night. The feature was patented. Customers could request conventional headlamps, but almost none did. Pierce Arrow had become a visual and mechanical statement. Presidents ordered them. William Howard Taft selected Pierce Arrow automobiles for official White House use, making them the first presidential cars. Woodrow Wilson rode in one during his inauguration. John D. Rockefeller owned several. Royal families across Europe commissioned bespoke examples. Pierce Arrow joined Packard and Peerless as one of the 3 Ps of motordom, regarded as the pinnacle of American luxury. World War I transformed the factory. Pierce Arrow shifted production toward military trucks. Over 12,000 were produced for Allied forces. At peak wartime output, nearly 10,000 workers filled the Elmwood Avenue complex. The factory ran continuously. Management boasted that Pierce Arrow consumed more aluminum than almost any manufacturer in the world. The war brought profits, full employment, and confidence. But government contracts end. When peace returned, Pierce Arrow faced a critical test. Could a factory designed for continuous operation survive on luxury automobile production alone? The 1920s brought prosperity, but also profound change. Ford demonstrated that mass production could dominate markets. General Motors demonstrated that offering vehicles across multiple price points could insulate companies from downturns. Even luxury manufacturers adapted. Packard introduced V12 engines and broadened its lineup. Cadillac embraced styling innovation and benefited from General Motors' resources. Lincoln survived through Ford's financial backing. Pierce Arrow did not adapt. The company simplified its lineup, maintaining a single chassis philosophy. It refused to introduce lower-priced models. Management believed that producing cheaper cars would dilute the brand and undermine the very prestige customers paid for. Sales peaked in 1929. Nearly 10,000 Pierce Arrow automobiles were sold that year. Then the stock market collapsed. Pierce Arrow's customers did not disappear because they became poor. Many remained wealthy. They disappeared because luxury consumption became socially unacceptable. When 1 in 4 Americans stood unemployed, driving a $10,000 automobile was no longer aspirational. It was provocative. Luxury became obscene. Ford survived on volume. General Motors survived on diversification. Pierce Arrow had no cushion. In 1928, Studebaker acquired Pierce Arrow, believing that adding a prestigious luxury brand would allow it to compete with Packard and Cadillac. The partnership was cautious. The 2 companies shared little beyond ownership. Pierce Arrow retained operational independence. Studebaker itself was financially vulnerable. When the Depression deepened, Studebaker collapsed into receivership in 1933. Its president resigned and later took his own life. Pierce Arrow regained independence at the worst possible moment, without capital, without protection, and without a market. In desperation, the company gambled on innovation. Designer Phil Wright created a radical concept car known as the Silver Arrow. It was streamlined, futuristic, and visually unlike anything else on the road. Fully enclosed fenders, no running boards, a fastback silhouette, and an interior that emphasized comfort and technology. The car carried the slogan, "Suddenly, it's 1940." 5 silver arrows were built by hand in just 3 months. The public reaction was overwhelming. The automotive press praised the design. The car attracted enormous attention. But attention does not generate revenue when buyers cannot access their savings and unemployment is widespread. At $10,000 per car, Pierce Arrow lost money on every silver arrow sold. The car was perfect. The timing was catastrophic. By the mid-1930s, sales collapsed. Buyers feared purchasing a luxury automobile from a company that might not exist to service it. In April 1938, Pierce Arrow declared bankruptcy. Assets totaled $1.2 million. Liabilities reached $1.9 million. After 37 years, Pierce Arrow was finished. The factory was auctioned. Machinery was sold to other manufacturers. Workers were dismissed. Skills accumulated over decades lost their context. Albert Kahn had designed the Elmwood Avenue factory to last centuries. It outlived its purpose. Portions of the complex still stand today, altered and fragmented. The internal logic that once moved raw materials into finished automobiles no longer exists. Pierce Arrow forces an uncomfortable question. Should companies adapt at any cost? Or is there value in refusing to compromise? Pierce Arrow chose integrity over survival. That choice destroyed the company and preserved its legacy. Surviving Pierce Arrow automobiles are worth millions today precisely because no more will ever be built. Where aluminum panels once moved down assembly lines, there is silence. Where thousands of workers once believed they were building something permanent, there are ruins. Pierce Arrow proved what American manufacturing could achieve and revealed its limits. This is what remains when excellence meets economic reality and loses.